Welcome back for another episode of Nebraska Shoot Around. I am your host, Jacob Bigelow. Joining me, as always, is my buddy Jacob Bigelow. How you doing tonight, Jacob?
Doing good, man. Better than I was last night. That's for sure. A little time to decompress and not overthink the whatever that was that we watched last night. Now we're just here to perform the autopsy. So here we are.
Yeah.
Here we are again. It's a place we have been far too many times before.
Yeah, well, here we go again with another kind of late night recording on Wednesday. Jacob and I, like you said, to decompress a little bit from that loss for Nebraska against Michigan, we went to the UNO against Drake game. We both know guys on both sides there, so kind of just fun to go see a competitive basketball game, not have to worry about the result or what was happening, and just sit back and watch. So
just a little palate cleanser.
Exactly, and now we go right back into the sour taste.
Now we go to the black hole. We go to the black hole. We just got done watching a home team, shoot above 50% from three, win the rebound war. They still lost, but it's the little things that you can take as little victories. But in case you do not know what took place 24 hours ago at Pinnacle Bank Arena, the second biggest home defeat in the history of Nebraska basketball, a 35-point loss to the Michigan Wolverines. Final score was 102-67.
I think that's only at Pinnacle Bank Arena, at least.
I think
they probably had worse losses previously, but we don't worry about those.
We don't worry about those. For ironically enough, the biggest defeat at Pinnacle Bank Arena, 36 points, also by Michigan. Michigan has a way of ripping the people's hearts out one way or another when they come to PBA. The other game we have to talk about, the opener for Big Ten play took place on Saturday, the 4th of December at Assembly Hall, where Indiana defeated Nebraska 68-55.
Yep,
55 points. Not great. We're probably not even going to go in order. We might just bounce back and forth. If we want to start with Indiana, I was preaching doom and gloom of beware of Trace Jackson Davis. Someone on that staff put together a game plan that actually held him in check pretty well. It was just the rest of Indiana's team that was the issue because they stepped up. Just now reminded Trace Jackson Davis somehow wound up being their leading scorer, even though we say they held him in check because he finished with 14. But Tamar Bates, highly touted freshman who came in off the bench, played 24 minutes a game. Not 24 minutes, played 24 minutes on Saturday. He finished with 13. He hit some tough shots on both halves.
I believe he had 11 of their 26 in the first half, and then he kind of quieted down, and then Jackson Davis got going a little bit. But still, you hold him to 14 points. That's 8 below what he was averaging going in, and he had scored, 78 or something like that in the two games previously.
I think so. I think it was either 78 or 76 because I know he had 42 at Assembly Hall,
I think, and then 30 something.
Yeah. But regardless, probably Nebraska's best defensive effort of the season. It's just the other end of the court where, once again, the evergreen saying, the shots just weren't going in. And as cliche as it sounds, I've said it jokingly, this time I'm dead serious. You got to make shots. And the moral of the story in both of these two losses that we're going to talk about is lack of shot making by anyone up and down. Almost anyone on this Nebraska roster from top to bottom, especially from 3-point range. 5 for 22 on Saturday at Assembly Hall.
And that doesn't even begin to describe the actual shooting effort. It was so much worse than that. They missed 15 of their first 16 shots, and then they tossed in a few at the end when the game was already basically decided. They hit 4 of their last 6. So that was good.
They started off well, too. They started off well, had a double-digit lead, and then Mike Woodson pulled all his starters, and the bench guys stepped up, got Indiana back into it by halftime, and just the yeah, second half, you could tell one team was gassed coming off of a 4 overtime loss and just couldn't figure it out. Nebraska once again led on Saturday by Alonzo Verge. I think what dawned on me was that we mentioned it, off the cuff, when we tried to preview Indiana, that Indiana, 3 pretty big players for them all, took official visits to Nebraska back in my days as a student manager, which feels like 10 years ago for me. But to see Race Thompson, Parker Stewart, and Xavier Johnson all starting and all really just doing what they needed to do down the stretch, really, I was just like, that was a moment for me to just be like, time kind of really does fly. But those guys are still playing college ball. They're all doing their thing, and you can chalk that up to the Kenya Hunter effect for them all being on the same roster at Indiana.
Yeah, and we can maybe kind of end this podcast on a high note, or at least a different kind of note after we get through all the unfortunate details of what happened last week. But do a little Bigelow manager story time at the end here if you got anything you want to share. So, and just keep that in the back of your head, and we'll see where we get to. But yeah, so the Verge deal. So I thought his first 4 minutes, that first stint before he sat down for the first time, he played really well. I thought he had a bucket or two there. I think he had a bucket. I think he got fouled. Maybe he set up. He made a couple nice passes to set teammates up. Really good start. Then he came back in, and we saw the kind of the bad side of Verge, where he was forcing it too much. He was turning the ball over, trying to make something happen that wasn't there. And the problem was nobody else could step up. So as poorly as he played, he finished with 6 turnovers. He was also the only one who scored in double figures. Finished with 15 on 6 of 13 shooting. He had 1 of their 5 threes. He was 1 of 2. He had 2 of their 5 free throws. He hit both of them. And he had 3 of their 9 assists. So he played poorly, and that was a big part of their offensive struggles because there was a lot of dysfunction. And it started with him bringing the ball up at times. But at the end of the day, somebody else has to step up. And you can bench it. We've seen Fred Hoiberg effectively bench him in the past so far this season, and had other guys kind of step up and pick up the slack. And we've seen Kobe Webster come in, have a big half against Creighton. We saw one of those other kind of body games where
so Casey get going against South Dakota.
But there was just nobody else. Bryce Mcgowan finished 8 points on 3 of 14 shooting and 3 turnovers, 1 assist. So that's just not enough. And that's kind of one of the teams where Bryce McGowan's just wasn't quite ready for Big Ten play, I guess, because he struggled.
His shot selection on Saturday was probably the worst I think it's been. He was taking a lot of way too deep threes, and this was forcing the issue, I felt like, and just not, when you need someone else, just anybody else, probably want to look to, the first 5-star recruit in program history to, maybe, be Robin or even maybe Batman, but he just hasn't been enough, hasn't done enough on either end. Like it's,
and again, in these games where he's struggled recently, a lot of it is kind of the physicality, and it really is taking him out of the game. And you can see he had a great cut to the basket where I think it went down as a block, but it wasn't like he got stuffed. It was just someone went up and contested it, and the ball ended up kind of flying out of his hands and wasn't able to get to go. It plays like that where he can get to the rim, but just doesn't have the strength to take contact or to square his shoulders and put the ball up on the glass or whatever it may be, where he's creating an opportunity to score, but just doesn't have the strength to finish it at this point. And when he's still not shooting the ball well. So when you're struggling to finish at the rim and the threes aren't falling, then what does that leave you with at this point? And that's kind of what he's working through. And so that's going to take some time. but he's going to have to adjust to it as well, because after the Kansas State, Kennesaw State, they're going right back into Big Ten play, and that's all they're going to face the rest of the year. So that was definitely a problem there, where he led you in shot attempts and got 8 points out of it. So, and you mentioned Keisei Tominaga, who had hit 10 threes in the 2 games previously. So Fred Hoiberg made a change and inserted him in the starting lineup and moved Keon Edwards back to the bench. And I like that move. I thought it balances things out a little bit. It gets you a little bit more shooting in that starting lineup to go with Verge and McGowan's, gives the defense one more guy that you kind of have to account for. I mean, heck, Juwan Howard had a lot of praise for Tominaga. Thought he was one of the better shooters in the conference, and he spoke highly. Like, there was a lot of coach speak after that when he described Nebraska based on what they had just showed, but he saw enough on tape to be impressed with him. So that's one more guy that you have to account for defensively. You got to make sure that you're not falling asleep, you're not losing him, and that could be just enough to give Verge or give Bryce the driving lane they need. So I like that move. Unfortunately, it didn't really produce anything. He finished with 5 points on 2 of 7 shooting, didn't hit a 3 until the final minute of the game. And they did defend it. He didn't get a whole lot of really good looks, but also we've seen him so far this season. Some of the ones he has hit haven't been his best looks. So he definitely has the ability to get hot at any points. I like that move, but unfortunately he didn't get going and nobody else did either. And the last 2 games, we had talked about the importance of Derek Walker and how his involvement had been so key during that stretch where they did win some of these games and play fairly well. And he 8 points on 4 or 5 shooting against Indiana, and then he technically didn't even attempt a shot, got fouled on the only shot he took in the Michigan game. And I think Hoiberg mentioned that he had been one of the guys that was dealing with an illness and maybe didn't quite have the energy that he normally plays with, and that's understandable, but you just can't have an entire game where Walker doesn't even get touches. And part of that was the style of defense I think Michigan was doing, where they're playing a lot of drop coverage, so that makes it tough to hit him on the roll. He's not really a pop guy, which is one way that you can really attack a drop big, is instead of rolling to the rim, you just step back and catch a ball and knock down that shot because the guy's waiting at the rim. But he doesn't really offer that option there. But they do have to find ways to keep him involved no matter what the defense is doing. It can't be, all right, they're playing this way, so we're not ever going to even try. And that was somewhat the case in that Michigan game. But that's the key, is Tominaga's got to get a little bit more consistent, and they got to find a way to keep Walker involved for sure.
Yeah, I think we can fully transition to ripping the Band-Aid off of last night fully. That was, I was offered tickets during the day. I'm glad I did not go. It was tough enough to sit on my couch and watch.
Lucky you.
In listening to Jason Benetti and Robbie Hummel just trying their hardest not to like laugh at Nebraska, like what they were doing. It was that was, insult to injury. I tweeted in the first half that before we know it, this was going to approach Ty Webster senior night levels of Michigan running Nebraska off their own court. I wasn't expecting it to actually get there, but it fell 1 point short. As someone who was directly involved in Ty Webster's senior night game in 2016-17, I think I know what it feels like to walk out of that arena after getting your what handed to you by Michigan. That was unlike anything I thought I'd have to see at that arena again. And to hear Fred Hoiberg get up in front of you guys after the game and hardly hesitate to use the Q word, and the Q word is quit. Yeah. And for him to not even hesitate and just be like, I've never been a part of a game like that where our guys just quit competing. That was daunting to hear as a fan and as someone who has been more invested in this program, both literally and, however you want to describe it, than the average person. That hit me hard.
And especially at this point in the season where we're not even to the end of non-conference play yet. They've still got three more non-conference games. Three, right? Auburn,
Kennesaw State, K-State. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so we still got a ways to go before even get into the grind that is conference season. These are two early games kind of standalone here early in the season. And to have already reached this point, that is not a good sign. And that was kind of the biggest thing to come out of that game was hearing just how beat up and frustrated that Fred Hoiberg is right now. And hear Derek Walker, who said, hey, it goes back to shoot around and warm-ups. And guys, we just from the start didn't have the energy that we needed to play with for whatever reason. And kind of got to the point where, hey, like we're lucky to have this opportunity. And every time we have a chance to step on the court, we should be excited about that. And for whatever reason, that just wasn't there in that game. And I mean, in the moment, it felt like some pretty good shot making from Michigan. And you're like, well, think everything's falling for them. Nothing's falling for you guys. And maybe sometimes that's just how it goes. But in going back and rewatching the games, because I subjected myself to mostly full rewatch that night to work on my column that we'll get to momentarily. But yeah, there were so many possessions where, like you said, guys just quit on a possession, like zero effort to close out, to rotate, to get back and actually defend somebody. It was one action, and I'm just going to stay here and hope that they don't pass to the open guy. And there were a few different guys that were really bad at that. There are guys that were helping when they shouldn't, guys that didn't help when they should have. It was just an absolute
doubled too late. I mean, I knew we were in for it. I think in the first, when they had Dickinson going early and Verge came over to double probably 5 seconds too late. Yeah. And he still goes up and just for the little baby hook. I was like, oh boy, they are lost.
And that's the thing there is like, yeah, it felt like Dickinson was unstoppable and that he was scoring every time he wanted to. You look at the final numbers, he had 15 points on 7 of 14 shooting and 3 assists, 2 turnovers. So it wasn't like he was the biggest problem.
He did not. He didn't set the world on fire. He just
the problem is they gave up a 20 points to Brandon Johns Jr., which ties his career high. He had been struggling mightily this season. And Musa Diabate, one of their 5-star freshmen, he was sick and didn't make the trip. So Johns got the start, who opened the season as a starter and lost it because of his poor play. He stepped in, knocked down a 3 right off the bat, very first possession. By the second media or the first media timeout, whatever. I think he had. But by the first media timeout, he had tied his season high with 7 points, and he finished with 20 on 6 of 9 shooting, and that was mostly him going to work in the post or getting wide open catch and shoot threes. That was defense, and then off the bench, Terence Williams, a second sophomore, kind of who plays the 4 and the 5 for them. Career high, 22 points and 9 of 12 shooting, 3 of 3 from deep. Like those are the kinds of guys. Those kind of numbers happen when the defensive effort is low. When guys that are weighed down the scouting report absolutely go off, that generally means they're getting really good looks. That's on you defensively more so than maybe a guy just having an out-of-body experience. And that's what we saw. 2 different guys set their season highs. Eli Brooks was their best shooter on the season going into that game. He missed his first 6. At one point, he was 0 for 5, and the rest of the team was 9 for 15 from 3.
Which is the most Nebraska basketball statistic I could possibly imagine. Caleb Houston, who hadn't been great per se, coming into the year.
The other 5-star freshman.
5-star freshman. We talked about him in our little mini Michigan preview. He had a solid game, 16-6, 6 of 9 shooting. I mean, it just kept coming in waves, and just the lack of intensity, urgency, like the just leaving guys just as wide open as they could be, and not even trying to pretend like they're gonna try to hustle over and close out.
And Houston was 4-7 from 3, and there were a couple where the defender was there like a step or 2 off, kind of a hand halfway up, and he just shot it. Like, you have to know your personnel, and he had he is struggling mightily, but he's a guy that he's not gonna like. I honestly hadn't been super impressed with him, even what I saw from him in high school in terms of what you would expect for a 5-star prospect. I outside of like shooting the ball, like what does he really do? He's 6'8". He's not super fluid off the bounce. Like he's not a guy that's gonna to create an isolation. So you're just letting him unbothered be kind of a catch and shoot, a size him up, knock down the shoot type of guy. Like that's just asking for trouble, and that's what happened in this game. So that goes back to again Houston 4 for 7, Williams 3 for 3, Johns Jr. 2 for 3. Like guys that aren't gonna do a whole lot if you make them put the ball on the deck, or at least are gonna be less damaging. And you're just letting them be catch and shoot spot up guys, and that is on the defense. And Michigan did a great job of moving the ball and kind of creating those openings, but also I mean, at a certain point you realize, hey, these guys aren't going to rotate. Then it's a lot easier to know, like, hey, we're going to get 2 swings of the ball and we're going to get a wide open look here because we know the defense isn't going to fight. And that was the word that Hoiberg used multiple times and put a lot of emphasis on it too. Is like they just did not fight in that game, and that was kind of the most disappointing part. And part of that, like, there's some human nature to it where they are hitting they're hitting some tough shots. Nothing you make or nothing you take is going in. That does get difficult, but you really you let that impact you to the degree that it did in that game, then you're asking for trouble.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know if it was like, Fred Hoiberg made the remark about, our guys shoot the ball well in practice. Maybe that's just our defense. I was really impressed with the way Michigan was moving the ball. And maybe that's just Nebraska's defense, but I thought their passing, their ball movement, their extra pass to find somebody wide open, I thought their whole offensive flow was really impressive. But so we can talk about you stayed up far too late on your rewatch to chart some possessions for Alonzo Verge. He is probably the only reason this wasn't a 50-point loss. He finished with 31 points to lead the way last night, 12 of 21 shooting, 8 rebounds, 3 assists. But you had a pretty good write-up about Verge and a possible case of deja vu.
Yeah, and check that out, padding the stats on hailvarsity.com. You can check the basketball page. It'll be right at the top there. So this season, you hear the murmurs in the crowd when Alonzo Verge is bringing the ball up. You hear the boos. There's one guy that a handful of games back that was yelling, pass the ball almost every single time. Like anytime he dribbled more than twice, it's like, pass the ball, like screaming from the crowd. Like you can hear that sentiment building. And there have been some stretches. Again, there are a couple times where Hoiberg's had to yank him because he has gotten really bad tunnel vision and has tried to do too much. But I had multiple people on my mentions talking about that in this game, and where there really was no other option for Nebraska in this game. This wasn't a case of Verge dominating the ball and making it impossible for anybody else to get going. Everybody else got a chance to touch the ball. They got shots, and nobody else could make it. And just kind of some of the stats that I ran through, some of the key ones. So you talk about like sitting Verge down and trying to run the offense through somebody else and share the ball and go away from that. He sat for 6 minutes and 42 seconds, and I'm excluding the last 3 minutes and change when Hoiberg started sending in the walk-ons. So in terms of rotation minutes, he only sat for 6 minutes and 42 seconds. They shot 2 of 14 from the field, 0 of 6 from 3, with the turnover in that stretch with Verge not on the field. They had the Bryce Mcgowan's and one, and then there was another bucket. I forgot what it was. But that was it. That was the only points that they scored 5 points while Verge was on the bench. So that wasn't the case where, well, Verge is the reason why nobody else can get going here. He had, I counted, and some of these are guys taking some tough shots. So maybe they shouldn't necessarily count, but these are guys taking shots that they felt confident in, and he got the ball to their hands in a situation where they could take the shot. I counted 16 assist opportunities where Verge passes led directly to a shot attempt. 12 of those were in the first half. he finished with 3 assists in the game on those 16 opportunities. He passed the ball, I think it was like 55 times I counted on basically something like 51 possessions that he was actually touched the ball on. So there was, especially early on in the game, he did not get to the point where he was like, all right, I've got to just put my head down and go, until late in the first half after things had already kind of gone off the rails. And then in the second half, a little bit more of the same, where the first few minutes out of the locker room, it was anybody else but him taking the shot, and it went really poorly. He's like, all right, fine, I got to go do this myself again. So he had 14 possessions where he didn't pass the ball once. And we had talked about that. I went back and tracked that early on in the season. I think that was the Western Illinois in the season opener. And we talked about how much of a problem that was. Well, that was actually their best offense in this game. He scored on 10 of those 14 possessions for a total of 21 points. And so that was 21 of their 67 right there, when nobody else touched the ball. It was just Verge, go make something happen, and he did. So that he was really the only source of offense. And it was really, you look at it, Keisei Tominaga was the second leading scorer with 11 points, and he shot 4-14 from the field. Bryce Mcgowan's had 8 points on 2 of 9 shooting. And he only took 2 shots and a couple of trips to the free throw line in the second half. And Derek Walker, like we mentioned, he scored 1 point, 1 of 2 from the free throw line in 18 minutes. He had some foul trouble in the first half, but
pretty sure he didn't take his first field goal, like even attempted a field goal. He got fouled on it until the game was far out of reach late in the second half.
Yeah, it was 3 minutes left in the game when he attempted his first shot and got fouled on it. So we talked about some of that was the defense, some of that was Verge. It's like, all right, I got to go do this myself. And you mentioned I kind of went with the deja vu title because it feels a lot like what happened with Nebraska fans and Teddy Allen last year, and where Teddy kind of became the boogeyman for Nebraska fans. He was the symbol of what's wrong with this team, where there's no ball movement, nobody, the ball is sticking, we're taking a lot of bad shots, and a lot of that was the case. But the problem was, even with that being the case, he was still their best option on much more often than not. He was their leading scorer. He was third on the team in assists. He was their most efficient perimeter player by far. So when you create a roster where there aren't guys that can create for themselves efficiently, when you have a guy like Teddy, you have a guy like Verge, they feel the pressure like, I got to go do this myself because nobody else is going to do it. And I think that's kind of the trap that Nebraska has fallen into with the way they built their rosters the last 2 years. And last year was slightly different. That was kind of more of the, all right, we're still trying to get a competitive roster in here, just get the best pieces we can, whatever. This year, it seems like they made a conscious effort to sacrifice playmaking off the bounds, to sacrifice defense. We're going to go out and get as much shooting as we possibly can because we need shooting to make this work. We need shooting to maximize guys like Bryce Mcgowan and give them space, guys like Alonzo Verge. So they went out, they got Keisei Tominaga, they got CJ Wilcher, they got Keon Edwards, they brought back Latman to kind of fill that role as well. They brought back Kobe Webster for a super senior year. They liked Wilhelm Breidenbach's potential as a shooter. They went out and got all these guys who are supposed to be able to shoot the ball. And right now they simply can't make shots. And Nebraska is 350th in the country in 3-point percentage. Out of 358 Division I teams, they are bottom 10 in the country. And that's after
25.4%.
Yeah.
I saw a breakdown like by player of just 3-point shooting for the season so far. Keisei, 18 for 52, 35%. Kobe, 8 for 24, 33%. Wilcher, 13 for 45, 29%. Verge, 5 for 20. Lat, 8 for 33. Bryce, 10 for 45. Wilhelm, 3 for 20. Keon Edwards, 0 for 12. Trevor Lakes, 0 for 3. That's a
And
lot. That's a lot of guys who were brought here to do one job, and that is to shoot from the outside, and they just have not produced to even to an average, like even to an average, like the mean. They are well below this, even a respectable showing from
and
shooting outside.
and they're worse than, again, this is the worst Hoiberg shooting team thus far, despite feeling so much more confident about the shooters that they brought in. And some of that, like, it's hard to explain. Like, uh, most of Kobe, like you look at Kobe Webster, and most of that came in one game outside of that Creighton game that didn't end up mattering anyway because they still lost. He's basically done nothing this season. For those 8 makes were in that game, and outside of that, he hasn't really hit many. CJ Wilcher was kind of hot to start the year, and boy, has he been ice cold the last 2-3 games now. Last 3, I believe, because the NC State game, he was the one where he went over until that last jumper.
Yep.
Keisei Tominaga has been super. He's 35%. Again, 10 of those 18 makes have come in 2 games, and
made
3 more
his first one of the regular season, and then was 0 for his next like 10, 12. Got going against South Dakota, and then just can't find any consistency.
Hit 2 of his first 3 against Michigan, and finished 3 for 11. So the problem is when none of these guys are able to hit shots, they don't really have a plan B. Like, CJ Wilcher isn't a guy that is going to be able to put it on the deck and go create offense for himself. You chase him off the line, you crowd him. I mean, he's probably going to end up forcing a tougher 3 instead, or get rid of the ball. Keisei Tominaga, we've seen him try to go to the rim, and it hasn't ended well more often than not. He's got a couple layups, nice layups off of cuts and stuff like that, but pretty much anytime he tries to put the ball on the deck when he gets chased off the line and go all the way, it ends poorly. It gets blocked, or he's not able to finish, or whatever. It's just not something he's going to be able to do reliably at this level with the athleticism and the length he's going to face. Lat Mayen, like that. We do have a really awesome photo from Eric Francis in our photo gallery of when he tried to end Hunter Dickinson's life just out of nowhere. That was a great cut, and Alonzo Verge hit him cutting along baseline, and he went up with bad intentions. And unfortunately, Dickinson is 7'1" and 200 and however many pounds, and so man wasn't able to get the ball through the rim, but he tried to dunk all over him. But outside of that, like he's not going to create much for you. If he was 1 of 5 from 3 in that game, and then split the 2 free throws on the foul on that dunk. And he has been maybe as big of a problem as anybody. Like we said, Tominaga has had stretches where he's really helped. CJ Wilcher has had hot stretches. Lat Mayen, who is starting for you and who led the team in threes last year, he shot 35%, which isn't good enough for the role that he plays on the team, but it was at least above the break-even point where it made sense. Yeah, keep shooting. This year, he has not really even had a single like impactful game, I would say. And obviously, he got ejected from that NC State game. He had 9 points against Creighton. He had 8 points against Idaho State. He had 8 points against NC State before getting ejected. And that's it. He still hasn't hit double digits yet this year. He hasn't made more than 2 threes in a single game. And defensively, he's a liability. Like I want to call out a lot of guys, but again, looking back, he was certainly one of those guys where either got lost or just didn't feel like I'm not going to chase out here. Somebody would rotate over to his guy and he wasn't chasing over to the open shooter. He just kind of like, all right, I'm just going to stay here. And so if the point is, if these guys aren't hitting shots, then what do they give you? And the answer is nothing right now. And that's what leads to Verge thinking, okay, it's got to be me. I've got to go create off the bounce. I've got to create something for myself, for my teammates every single time down, because nobody else is doing anything with the opportunities when they do have them. And the one guy that has the potential to do that is Bryce McGowan. But like we talked about, he's had 3 rough games in a row where he is 14 of 46 from the field in his last 3 games. And he's scored 8 points in each of the last 2 in the 2 Big Ten games. So if he's not creating off the bounce and nobody else really is, where's the offense going to come from? Obviously, everybody pass the ball, move it, and that's what coaches want. But eventually, somebody is going to have to create an advantage, put some pressure on the defense, because simply passing the ball doesn't magically create shots. Eventually, the way you create shots with ball movement is someone drawing a double team and kicking it and swinging it. Someone setting a really good screen and running hard off it and getting open. Like somebody eventually has to be a threat with the ball in their hand or even off the ball where you're making the cut, you're coming off the screen, and they just don't have guys right now that are putting any kind of pressure on defenses outside of Verge.
Yeah, I feel like if you're scouting this Nebraska team, I don't really know if there's anyone who's highlighted or circled outside of Verge, and I'll hand it to him. When they showed shots of him like later in the game, you could tell he was emotional. He had the towel over his head, and it looked like he was on the verge of maybe tears or whatever. But you could tell he was embarrassed. You could tell he did what he could, and just no one else really was there to assist in the effort last night, or lack thereof, you may say. But that's and now in the thing that no one's really said yet. We're still only 24 hours post mortem. I've said that far too many times on this podcast already. But is they go to Atlanta to play Auburn on Saturday morning, and if they play like they played last night, they might lose by 50 to Auburn. Just based on the athleticism and length that Auburn has 1 through 5, how physical they play, how tough they are. It's going to be it could be the biggest wake-up call imaginable on Saturday morning.
Yeah, Auburn, with the first ranked team, I think, that they're going to face. They are 18th in the AP poll this week. They are 7-1. They're led by a lottery pick freshman in Jabari Smith, who's 6'10" and taking 5 threes a game, hitting them at a 44% clip. That's going to be a tough matchup for Nebraska. Katie Johnson is getting buckets, a transfer guard there. Walker Kessler, the transfer from North Carolina, isn't having a huge season, but like he's certainly capable if you don't account for him, he can put a lot of pressure on you with his ability to score at the rim and from the perimeter. So yeah, this is going to be the toughest game they've played thus far. And it's technically a neutral site game, but that's going to be a home game for Auburn. There's going to be a lot of Auburn fans over there in Atlanta. It is a 10:30 a.m. game, so that will probably somewhat neuter the home crowd impact. It's kind of hard to get off and get pretty rowdy and properly pregame for that early of a game, but it's going to be away from home and against a really good team coming off of the worst game that you've played thus far, where your coach basically straight up said that you quit. So this is going to be a real test. What does this team have left? What are they playing for? How much pride do they have? Because especially with some of the illnesses, and we forgot to mention now Wilhelm Breidenbach, who got set up for a little bunny, missed it, tried to follow it up and came down, and something happened with his knee. You could tell right away. It was a non-contact injury. It didn't necessarily get rolled up on or anything like that. He just came down wrong and jumped back up, and you could see right away that it was bothering him. And eventually made his way over to the bench, got looked at, and I think Fred Hoiberg said on the radio show that he's for sure going to be out on Saturday, and then potentially longer than that. And one of the guys that could be a candidate to potentially, like at this point, why not give him a shot, is Trevor Lakes, but he is also on the shelf right now. He had a cleanup kind of surgery on the surgically repaired shoulder that cost them a lot of time this offseason. So that's another guy. So now you're down to Latmayan and Keon Edwards, basically, or you're going to be playing a lot of 4-guard lineups. So exactly what this team didn't need is losing another guy that, and Wilhelm, he wasn't playing great, but he was one of the few guys.
He was fighting.
Mentioned too. Yeah, he
was fighting hard.
He was playing hard. He couldn't get the ball to go through the basket, really. I think he was 2 for 7 from the field, but he was playing hard. He was making plays defensively. He certainly was fighting. So, and now he's gone for however long it ends up being. Hopefully it's not too serious, but we know on Saturday that he's not going to play. So that's one less guy that can bring the energy. You're going to need Eduardo Andre to step up and be playable. He's been really up and down as that backup 5. And there's been some stretches where he's played really well and stretches where he's really hurt the team when he's out there. You got to be able to limit those negative plays and really be able to eat up minutes, particularly if Derek Walker gets some foul trouble again.
And you have to assume Keon Edwards will probably be playing. Well, you can't really assume anything after Fred Hoiberg said he's going to be looking at everything, every aspect of the game to see what needs to change. But it might be welcome to the showtime for real for Keon Edwards, who's only playing 7.5 minutes a game. But Saturday could be ugly. And then they have almost a week off. They come home to play Kansas State. They have 8 days off. Yeah. On Sunday, they come back to play K-State, then the last bye game against Kennesaw State. So we'll only have one game to talk about next week. A little preview of K-State maybe. But
we'll have to definitely get Steve Marek on next week, talk about the women's team a little bit.
Yeah, they keep on rolling. They're 9-0, go on the road for their Big Ten opener. They go to the Barn and held off a late charge from Minnesota to get a big road win. So they're 9-0. Don't know if they'll be ranked quite yet, but they could be inching closer. So yeah, we'll probably talk to Steve next week about Amy Williams' bunch. In
the meantime, though, as promised, let's get to a little Bigelow story time.
Some story time, eh? Some story time. So funny enough, last week I thought about, talking about road trips in honor of Indiana being the road opener. That's one of the few places in the Big Ten that I never got to go to. I did check off almost all the boxes. If I had to say the best road environments that I was a part of, probably I really liked Purdue. I was at the Purdue game where Isaac Copeland got teed up for staring at Isaac Haas after he took his life away on a dunk.
That was so bad.
I wasn't on the bench then because I had to go make sure that our Chipotle showed up for our post-game meal before we got on the plane. But I really liked Purdue. That's a really cool setup, and they're a really good team this year too, so that helps. My first Big Ten road trip was to Maryland.
That's a long one.
On New Year's Day, 2017. So there was very sleepy. I think it was an 11 a.m. game. Very sleepy crowd. That was the Mello Trimble, Kevin Hurrdat team. I had no idea who Kevin Hurrdat was going into that game. I think he finished with. I think he might have had his Maryland career high that day. I think he hit like 6 threes against us. I'm just like, who is this redheaded white kid who is just making it rain? And then my boss on the basketball staff looks at me and goes, oh, he was New York Mr. Basketball. I'm like, what? And I was just like, okay. But then Nebraska, I think we stormed back. We were down like 10 at the under 4 and came back and won it late. So that was fun. Wasn't the full Maryland experience though. Wisconsin, I got to go to Wisconsin once. That was another come from behind win. That was cool for me because I had some friends who went to school at Marquette. They made the trip over. It's like the Wisconsin equivalent of going from Omaha to Lincoln. So that was cool. And then honestly, it was a one-off. It was weird. People didn't like it, but I was able to go on the trip to New York for the Big Ten tournament. The one year we were at Madison Square Garden, and that was quite the experience. Didn't go the way anyone hoped it went, but that's another one.
You called it. 26 points, 7 of 11 from 3. Kevin Hurrdat was in that game.
Wow, look at me with the memory. Yeah, January 1st, 2017. That was a long time ago. But and then my first ever road trip, like within my first month of the season as a freshman, was out to Clemson. Clemson, weird place. Here to tell you, weird place. It's in the middle of nowhere. You cannot land a plane within an hour of Clemson. The closest airport is an hour away. It's a long flight, obviously. And when we got there, I'm like, all right, how long to the hotel? And someone's like, hour 15. I'm like, what? And they're like, oh, Clemson. They're like, yeah, Clemson is in the middle of nowhere. And that was very true. And we had a chance to win it at the end. Drew something up for Ty Webster. The classic 10 miles end of game play, give the best player the ball and see if he can get fouled going to the rim. Sorry, coach. I know you're not listening, but so we lose that one by 1. And then then it was raining. It was raining after the game. So we're already not in a great mood. We're getting rained on while we're filling up the bus. I was already, anointed as the food guy, so I have to make sure our Chick-fil-A gets there. And it's very hard to be sad eating Chick-fil-A, and that is still to this day the saddest Chick-fil-A I've ever eaten, because it was in a soggy wet wrapper on a bus for an hour 15 from Clemson to Greenville, South Carolina, to get on the plane. And then this is, little me. I'm a freshman in college, living in the dorms, and it's a 3.5-hour flight from South Carolina to Lincoln, Nebraska. And I think we were a 9:00 tip, like Eastern time, for this Big Ten ACC game. So I'm walking back into my dorm in Abel Hall at 4:45 in the morning. And I'm like, I have to go to class in 5 hours.
Oh, no. No.
And then, of course, I'm walking, I've got my travel gear on or something, and some kid I've never seen before in my life, he's like, hey, you were just on TV. Like, I'm like, oh, don't remind me. Don't remind me. He's like, I saw you. You a basketball manager? I'm like, yes, that's me. You saw me. I was there. There's still one of my favorite screenshots of me in action is me with my little Gatorade 6-pack, like shocked, stoic face, like we're down too late, and Miles is drawing up the X's and O's, and I'm just in the background like, this is a lot, but
just a lot.
So that was how my road trip career got started. A lot of interesting times on the road. A lot of times where all the managers had to share rooms. A lot of nights slept on floors, sharing beds. All sorts of interesting memories on the road.
It truly is a glamorous job, is it not? Just being a manager for a Division I basketball team.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I can confirm the worst road trip in the Big Ten is to Happy Valley. I can tell you that is by far the worst trip. Also,
you mentioned how tough it is to get to Clemson, and I would kind of had
it is. Yep, it is also very, very hard to get there. That was also, I think, that was during a time where a certain center was rumored to be leaving the team, and he wasn't on the flight out there. Everyone's like, oh, sources say da da da. I'm just like, he's not here. Oh no. But so that was a fun trip. Penn State, if you're going to Penn State, you're going for one reason and one reason only, and that is the Penn State Dairy Store ice cream. That is the best ice cream in the world. But the Penn State basketball experience on a weeknight when there's maybe 400 people in the Bryce Jordan Center, you're just going to have nightmares of the cat growl sounder for for the next couple of days, especially after you lose to Penn State. That's not. So that is my mushed up jumble of some road trip stories. Hopefully you got a chuckle from maybe one or two of those, but
we don't really travel for basketball. Creighton is really the only road game that I go to when that's in Omaha, and technically it's a home game for me since I live here in Omaha. But I did get the opportunity to go down to Allen Fieldhouse when Nebraska went down there and faced Kansas. And I have to say that was pretty cool. I'd never been before, but kind of walk through there, see a ton of all the murals to walk through, and just I guess I'd seen games there before, but I'd never really like seen the stands and the area, like the press seating it's almost like little like like desks like that you'd have in middle school or whatever, where it's just this weird little like flat top up top over this little benches. Like that's the press seating up in the corner. It was kind of it's
kind of like that at the barn too. It's kind of like that at the barn. You're kind of up on a perch. That's a tough place to get in and out of if you're trying to get through the cramped hallways of that place. I think the game I got to go to at the barn, that was when Richard Pitino ripped his tie off and got teed up, and Kent called him a jackwagon on the radio. But there was those are I never got to go to either Michigan. I never went to Piscataway. Really hurt my heart there. Did get to go to Illinois. Never got to go to Assembly Hall. I think I got more than half of them though. But I mean, if you're listening to this and you're a Big Ten you're a basketball fan in general, or I would if you want to see Nebraska win, I wouldn't recommend making the trip to West Lafayette. But that is the trip I can't recommend enough for Big Ten road venues. And Purdue is phenomenal this year. They're the number one team in the country for the first time in school history right now. So that place, I'm sure when Nebraska plays there, will be buzzing.
Yeah, for sure. But fortunately, they've got some time to hopefully figure some things out. He mentioned, Hoiberg said at this point he's going to have to consider everything in these couple days off before they head down to Atlanta. So we'll see what that means in terms of lineups, in terms of rotations, in terms of what they try to do offensively. Who knows at this point? It's not like there are any easy solutions to what's happening, because like we mentioned, they kind of back themselves into the corner with the roster construction here. And at this point, you just have to hope they start making shots. That's the easiest way to turn this around. But in the meantime, he's going to have to try some other things. So, like you said, we've only got this one game before we next record. So that will be that Auburn game down in Atlanta, and the Hoops Giving holiday, whatever.
Holiday Hoops Giving.
Yeah.
4-game little showcase event in kind of Atlanta.
Halfway between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So kind of I don't really know what the deal is, but what Hoops Giving means.
Nope. Nobody does, except for ESPN. That's who's putting it on. I think the other matchups, I think Drake Clemson is in there. LSU, Georgia Tech, and Ole Miss, Western Kentucky. I think it's a four-game event down at the State Farm Arena in Atlanta. I think it was also
the 10:30 a.m. tip-off time.
Yep. I think there was also a big like high school showcase thing that happened over this past weekend. It was part of the same event as well. But so that's what we got coming up on Saturday. Like we said, one game on the docket to talk about. So we'll probably touch on the women's team with Steve next week. And I don't have anything else to plug. I can just plug Jacob in his column, very good read for you or anyone you know who has made the comp between Teddy Allen and Alonzo Verge. I will say that is your homework. That is your required reading. And just stay tuned for what everything that the good folks at hailvarsity.com have coming your way. Some football news this week. Volleyball in the Sweet 16 on Thursday night with if they beat Illinois, Elite Eight against Texas on Saturday night in Austin. So still some positivity going on in the Nebraska athletics realm, and stay tuned to Jacob and everyone else at Hail Varsity's good coverage of the happenings in Husker land.
Yep. So I think you just about covered it. Like you said, stay tuned. HailVarsity.com. We'll be active on Twitter. I'm at Jacob Bigelow _. You can follow Jacob at the _Bigelow, I believe. Is that correct?
That is correct.
About time that I memorized it here. But yeah, so we will talk at you next week, and hopefully we have some better things to talk about, whether they win or lose on Saturday. Hopefully Hoiberg is able to find some answers, find some way to make some progress here, because that's what they're going to need here. These last 3 games of the non-conference is build towards something. Just find something that works that you can rely on, and then hopefully go from there. But we'll see. We will be back at you next week, and thank you for listening.
A Hurrdat Media Production.